Welcome to Reflections. I'm your host, Patrick Tomlinson, and today we have with us Miss Rosalind McLymont, who has um, consented to coming back to speak to us about a different aspect of her endeavors. Rosalind is an author, a trade consultant, a publisher, and business executive. Welcome again, Rosalind, and thank you for coming back.
And thank you for asking me back, Patrick.
Okay. Well, as anybody can determine, it's you have such a wide and varied experience, and I wanted to speak or start off by I remember you're telling me a long time ago of your experiences working with a trade publication and getting into journalism because you're also a journalist.
Yeah, I'll tell you about my journey in trade in the global arena. What
Okay.
happened is, since a child, I was very interested in the international, right? I wanted to learn languages. I wanted to speak all the languages of South America. I was born in Guyana, and so you have Spanish, Portuguese, and you have Dutch and all of that. And so when I came to the United States, I went to college. I studied French, more formally, and Spanish. I went over to Spain to get some education at the University of Madrid there, and I majored in languages and got immersed in the cultures, overseas cultures. And then, uh, I went to live in Africa because I am a Garveyite, right? I believe in the philosophy and opinions of Garvey. A strong Africa makes the African race a strong race. All right. So I lived in Uganda during the time of Idi Amin, and I lived in the Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, which was then Zaire, under President Mobutu, Mobutu Sese Seko, Kukungwendu Bazabang. He had a long name. And when I came back to the United States, my children were born in the Congo. So when I came back to the United States, okay, had to have a job. And so I went back to school to study journalism, and I got my first real job in journalism was with this publication, the Journal of Commerce, a legendary publication known as the Bible of International Shipping and Trade. It was founded by Samuel J. Morse, right, back in 97, whenever, 27, I think. Yes. So that exposed me fully to the world of international trade and the whole integration of our lives, ordinary lives, with the way things work in the global arena. And I found that fascinating. It allowed me to travel many more times to Africa, to Europe, to Russia, all kinds of different places, focusing on the world of international trade, reporting on European integration in 1992, on Glasnost, on the Canada, the North American Free Trade Agreement involving Canada. I went to Canada to talk to union people about their feelings about this integration. It is fascinating. Trade is very important for ordinary people to take interest in, because everything we consume most of it comes from somewhere else. So it's good to have a conversation about trade, and I'm glad that I was given the chance to become exposed to it and to continue in it as a journalist to begin with. And in the course of practicing journalism, I became well versed in entrepreneurship development, focusing particularly on developing countries, Asia at the time, and then Africa also. And my experience of living in Africa really brought everything home in terms
Okay.
of trade.
Okay. Now, if you were to sum up the current environment of global trade, um, how would you put it? How would you characterize it?
Robust, exciting, because the world is a lot more integrated now. Take, for example, remember what happened a few days ago with the ship Ever Given that was stuck in the Suez Canal?
Right.
Loaded with goods to be dispersed in the United States all over. And then there was a whole backup because it was stuck. Several ships were backed
I
up.
think it's 200 or 300 ships.
Exactly. Some chose to go around the Cape of Good Hope because between the Suez Canal is the shortest route between Asia and Europe, instead of having to go all the way around the bottom of Africa, you see. So because we import so much, because we consume so many things that are made outside, our things were on those ships as well, the things that we buy, the things that we consume. And so you heard toilet paper prices are going to go up because the availability. This all shows how integrated trade is. And now that you have all of these countries opening. It's not just Europe and America. It's not just the northern countries. You have the southern countries coming in. Africa, for example, with a very young population, more than 60% under the age of 25, exposed to all of the things that the world has to offer, technology, fancy clothes, all of that it can make and sell outside or import. And so you have this robust activity. Companies have moved to places where they think they can have better cost in manufacturing the goods, so prices don't have to be so high. It's cheaper to manufacture, for example, in Asia than to manufacture in the United States because prices here, the cost of labor costs are higher here. You have good quality now that comes from outside. In the past, you used to mock some of the things coming from certain places, certain regions. Oh, the quality is not good. But look at the cars coming from Asia, coming from Japan, right? Because you say quality is a lot better. You're getting things out of Africa. Technology, technological innovation out of Africa. The Caribbean, you've got nice vegetables coming from there, flowers, and all sorts of other things. So it's such an integrated world. And the opportunities are just limitless for businesses to get involved in this international movement of goods and people and services. Yeah,
Okay.
it's exciting.
Okay. Now, we have a new head of the World Trade Organization, I believe it is,
Yes.
and it's a woman from the continent of Africa. What significance? One, is there that there's a female, and two, that she was born in Africa or raised in Africa or from Africa?
Okay. Well, the World Trade Organization, the WTO, which succeeded the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, the GATT, it is the organization that sets the rules for most of the world's trade, for most of the movement of goods and services in the world. And for the first time, you have a female, and that female happens to be African. This woman comes with a lot of credibility. Dr. Ngozi Oconjo Iweala. She was a finance minister in Nigeria. She was a finance minister. She's a former managing director of the World Bank. She's an economist. She's an international development professional. She's got more than 30 years experience working in Asia, Africa, Europe, Latin America, and North America. She's a graduate of Harvard and MIT. That's what she comes with. Now, her belief, her core belief is the power of trade, international trade, the buying and selling of goods to lift developing countries out of Africa. This is her core belief. And to assist when you allow other countries, these developing countries, to be engaged in trade, to export their raw materials or processed materials, and to buy, to import for inputs into their factories, it helps their economic growth. It makes their economic growth more robust. She also believes that this World Trade Organization, this whole trading system, needs to be strengthened and bring in more of the developing world's expertise and their concerns. So the trade organization needs to be more focused. A lot more energy we can expect will be focused on bringing developing countries into a higher economic growth, lifting them out of poverty, and just bringing them into making them much more an integral part of the global trading system. Mhm.
Okay.
That's what we
Very
can
good.
look for.
Very good. So, from your experience, how has this pandemic affected World Trade One and the projections or outlook for world trade?
Well, you can imagine economies were shut down. Countries were shut down. People were not buying as much. Imports from overseas in the United States declined somewhat. Exports also declined because with the pandemic, with the closing down of economies, not just the closing down, but certainly the lowering of economic activity, there was not enough revenue to buy from overseas. Demand slowed, demand fell, and so those who were exporting saw their exports shrink. So they were not earning enough money then to turn around and get more involved in local manufacturing or to buy from overseas to meet the demand. So the pandemic really put a damper on economic activities. And those countries that have natural resources, that export natural resources, like or those regions like Africa where a lot of oil is exported, right? A lot of other raw materials. Demand, there was not much buying, so they did not have the revenue now to import the inputs that they needed for their factories and even for ordinary consumption. Asia was the one that was the exception. The outlook now that the pandemic is not as severe as it is, you have vaccines, you got the opening up of economies a little more, you find economic activity beginning to pick up again, right? Economic activity is picking up again. And so the outlook, many companies that were surveyed said, yeah, we're feeling it now. We're feeling the slowdown. We're feeling the pinch now, but it's going to pick up. And our outlook is positive. International trade is going to re-emerge in its dynamic form because then there's that hunger again to get the things that people needed to begin economic activity again, to begin the whole import-export dance that the world is engaged in. So people are more optimistic. They're very optimistic about what is likely to be happening. The demand for traded goods, North America, the United States, Canada, it's expected that demand will increase by over 11%. Over 11%. So the United States is going to be the biggest import market. It has been importing a lot. That will pick up. That's good for developing countries that export raw materials. Also, you find developing countries taking a more inward look in that they want to do a lot more processing at home. And so the demand for inputs, for equipment from overseas is going to be coming in to those developing countries to boost their factories, to boost their logistics, to boost their infrastructure, that kind of equipment, the demand for materials to assist in that processing, that greater manufacturing at home. You're going to see a lot of that. And then you have the free trade in Africa, you have this continental free trade agreement. A lot of American companies are looking at a market that's potentially, 1.7 billion people who are trading across borders. They can have in engagement in that, in production for that market.
Okay. Um, I just wanted to ask you to speak to this issue of sustainable development because different countries are employing and embracing different strategies in their development experience. So we hear a lot about sustainable development. Could
Mhm.
you just explain to us, those of us who are not familiar with the term and those who are, tell us the strengths and advantages as emerging nations look for a model to develop?
Let's look at the word sustainable to begin with. What does it mean? Something that is sustained is something that endures, right? It does not necessarily have to be sustained as is, as these people are talking about. It doesn't have to be sustained as is, but constantly improving, but sustained in its longevity, in its existence. Now, sustainable development for developing countries and even sustainable development for local businesses wherever they are, North America, wherever they are. The sustainability depends on, there are a few factors involved here. The environment. You're better in your sustain your business if your environment, the environment that is in which that business is, in which the country is, if it is preserved and protected from destruction. So if you pollute the air constantly, you pollute the air constantly without paying attention to mitigating that pollution, what can happen? First of all, your population becomes ill with all of the pollutants in the air, which puts a damper on their productivity. It means they cannot produce at their maximum potential. And if your factories are not producing at maximum potential, those factories cannot make the products to sell, whether locally for the local markets or to export. And so there's a whole chain reaction. So climate, environment, those are very important factors in terms of sustainable development. Secondly, in addition to environment and climate that has to be addressed, that demand practices that preserve and keep them in a way that they will be beneficial to production and economic and social and health growth. In addition to that, the practices that a business undertakes in terms of its management. You want a management system that will help that company to grow, that will help also expand it from a company to a country. You want management of the country, management of the business, management of the community, of the health of the community. You want that management system to be such that it puts the entity, whether the country, the business, the organization, into its best possible light, into its best possible structure for growth and for production. And so sustainable development demands attention to how you manage things, not just for the growth and the best function of your entity, but also for the climate, the environment in which you live.
Okay. Now, as it relates to, you mentioned earlier the continent of Africa and emphasis on Africa, and we see that a lot in the news and other media outlets. What are some of the opportunities that exist for not only small business but medium and large-sized businesses as they look to the continent of Africa?
Okay, as you look, what are the opportunities? Again, keep your eyes open for opportunities in sustainable development. That is agriculture, priority areas of development. Agriculture, in some countries, it's tourism. You need technology innovation that will help to improve certain systems, the agricultural systems and industries, other industries, social constructs, your health, education, security, transportation, education, I mentioned education already, manufacturing, processing. Look at the opportunities for becoming involved, whether supplying equipment, whether partnering with local firms on the continent, in the Caribbean, wherever, we're talking about the continent, partnering with local companies so that you can come in either with your expertise or with financing or with equipment to help boost those companies. Also, technology, invest in technology startups. There are myriad opportunities in technological innovation in Africa. And that's why you find the Googles and the Twitters and all of these guys running over to Africa, to the hubs, the technological innovation hubs that are so robust in Africa. Some of the things, for example, that you find, Mellow Cab in South Africa. This is a fully electrical vehicle that gives transportation in urban areas of South Africa. You've got another innovation, charging shoes, where inside of within the shoes, while you're walking, you have these chips in the shoes, chips of crystal that are inserted into the sole of the shoe, right? Local people, local innovators are doing this, and sometimes they need just a small amount of money or expertise or help marketing in order to grow those businesses. You've got the M-Pesa, which is a mobile payment system that was developed in Africa long before the rest of the world. Developed countries started talking about mobile payment systems. So in technology, you have technological innovation. You have that. And mind you, these big guys are over there. MasterCard, Visa, Google, they're all looking at developing, they're all getting involved in doing in the technological innovation scenario landscape in Africa. And then you have the Continental Free Trade Area that is being implemented, and hopefully it will be implemented to the fullest degree. And what do you have? You're looking at 1.7 billion people in a continent, and you're talking about a free trade area where countries are producing cross-border within Africa itself. And certainly big companies, small companies, medium-sized companies here in North America, in the Caribbean, certainly there's room to get involved in production, in transportation, in logistics, in telecommunications, also in marketing expertise, all sorts of entrepreneurial type of development. There are areas of opportunity there. What does it take? It's not a cakewalk. It's certainly not going to be a cakewalk. Nobody said it's going to be easy, and it's not for the faint of heart. But if you go in, the reward, the returns on your investment far outweigh the returns that, am I going to say, that you can get from the stock markets, for example, right? Speaking of which, the stock markets in Africa are performing a lot more robustly than
Can you mention a couple of the major ones? I wanted to ask you about that.
What
the more prominent ones?
In South Africa, Nigeria, yeah. Ghana, Kenya. Those are some of the major ones. Ghana in particular that are performing very well. And when you do other kinds of investment, direct investment, you invest your expertise, you invest finance outside of the securities markets, the return on investment, you're hearing 30%, all of those kinds of percentages, those figures you're hearing. Yes.
Well, we have about 5 minutes left, Rosalind, but I wanted to, before closing, for us to just invite your expertise on the role of cryptocurrencies and how you see them evolving.
Cryptocurrencies are becoming increasingly popular in developing countries because they help them more than can be seen in North America, in the developed world. First of all, there's a lot of remittance of monies of monies from developed countries into developing countries. People come over to Europe, they come over to North America, and they send money back home. Western Union, MoneyGram, all those people, they charge a whole lot of fees in order to get to be able to get that money over back home. And so with cryptocurrencies, you can bypass it. You can have their platforms that are being developed, people-to-people payment systems that use cryptocurrency. So you transfer your Bitcoin directly to the recipient on the other side, back home. many of the countries are developing their own cryptocurrencies. Senegal has its own, South Africa has its own. They've developed their cryptocurrencies, and you've got other kinds of systems that bring more people. Financial inclusion is another way that it is beneficial for developing countries, because banks in developing countries, you know, Patrick, they charge an arm and a leg. First of all, they don't like to lend to small businesses, and when they do, they want everything, a pound of flesh from you. With cryptocurrencies, they come in, they have these platforms where they can deal direct from customer to customer directly. Payment systems bring these people in. They don't have to go through the established banking system that's charging them an arm and a leg to get a loan, if they do get a loan. And so, yes, for the growth of companies, for the ability to directly pay, to receive monies, to send money, all of that, cryptocurrencies are becoming very popular in the developing world.
Okay. Now, it would be a little bit of remiss on our part if we didn't ask you to speak a little bit about your involvement as an author. And I know you have 2 books out. Would you like to just take a minute to tell us about that?
Sure. My first novel is called Middle Ground by, you see my author name up there. Middle Ground is the first renewed Africa. It's the first novel about Africa that looks at it not from a beggar dog, charity case war. It's an Africa that I saw when I lived there, an emerging Africa with its robust and dynamic sense of entrepreneurship. It talks about that, and it brings the diaspora together, how North Americans. The second novel that you see up there, The Guyana Contract, again, the global arena, it teaches you, this talks about a major corporation going into a small country to help develop its infrastructure and all that comes involved in that. When a Black professional American woman has to go there and negotiate the contract, and all of the intrigue of big companies going into smaller companies, and some of the underhandedness that takes place at the hand of the big corporations, and of course also on the part of the host countries. And the last one, Africa Strictly Business, The Steady March to Prosperity. That is a nonfiction book that carried a lot of my columns that I wrote for the Journal of Commerce about Africa's road, its own attempt, its own efforts to become prosperous without begging from outside, what people in Africa themselves are doing to uplift themselves. That's why it's strictly business, not about starving bellies and begging and charity and that sort of thing.
Thank you so much, Rosalind. A mouthful. And thank you so much for coming on and appearing on Reflections.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
The best to you and your endeavors.
Thank you, Patrick, and the same to you.
That's it from us at Reflections.